Hello everyone and welcome back to your sourdough series. Today we're making our first loaf of sourdough bread and we're going to be using our active sourdough starter that we have already hydrated. And if you follow the steps in the previous sourdough series, steps 1 through 6, it will teach you how to hydrate your sourdough from dried sourdough chips. So whether you bought from me or you were gifted them from somebody, once you get dried sourdough, you have to rehydrate, and those steps I teach you in each step how to rehydrate it and get it to this active bubbly stage right here that you see that you need to make some delicious sourdough bread. So today I'm making my basic sourdough bread. It calls for 2 flours. It has all-purpose and bread flour, and then you need some water and you need some salt, and that's pretty much it, and your active sourdough starter. So this is the sourdough starter that I rehydrated in the videos. This is Bread Pitt in regards to Brad Pitt. It's Bread Pitt. He's super active and bubbly. He's ready to go. So I want to make sure that you know when you're ready to bake bread, you have to feed your sourdough starter beforehand. So normally I like to feed my starter about 2 days beforehand. So give it 2 feedings, 1 each day. And then the 3rd day is when I start to bake bread. So I like to bake bread in the morning. And so I usually feed my sourdough starter the night before and then a previous night before. So 2 nights before, 2 nights I will feed it. And then the next morning I will bake bread. And that's what you want to do to make sure it's active and bubbly. It was active and bubbly yesterday, but I knew it could be a little more active, so I fed it another time. So you want to do 2 full feedings of 1:1:1 ratio, flour, starter, water, 2 times, and then on the 3rd day, you wake up in the morning and you bake bread. So you do want to give it about 8 to 12 hours to get bubbly and active. After that, it will start to drop down and it won't be super active to bake bread. And I will show you what to look for when I zoom in on what to look for to make sure you know that your starter is active and bubbly. So yes, you can look at it and see that it's active and bubbly, but there's another way to test it too, and I'll show you that. So again, all you need is some all-purpose flour and bread flour, your sourdough starter, you need a scale, you need a nice big mixing bowl, and you need some warm water. And let's get started. So you're gonna love this process. It's really easy. This is the basic one. It doesn't have a lot of tang to it, so it's really great for kids. My kids absolutely love this bread, and it's great to add variations to it. So if you want to add cheese to it, herbs, you want to add chocolate chips to it, you can add a lot of things to it, and it's really easy. Just fold all the add-ins in, and it's really easy than that. And that's it. Super simple. If you do want an extra tangy one, I will have a video about that. That's extra tangy. That it uses more sourdough starter. But this one is a perfect basic one. Once you master this, then you'll be able to move on to a little more intricate, advanced breads. But this is super basic. You'll have bread in about a day. It does have to rise in the refrigerator overnight. And then throughout the first day of making the dough, we're going to do a fold-in technique. And we're going to do that throughout the day. And then you put it in the refrigerator overnight. And then the next morning, you shape it, bake it, and then you'll have bread by the next day for dinner. So that's what we're doing today. So I'm going to zoom you in. I'm going to show you what we're looking for. And I'm going to walk you through the steps on how to do it, the fold-in techniques, and all the shaping. And I'm so excited that you're joining me on this journey, and I hope you're excited too, because you are super duper close to having some fresh homemade baked bread. So let's get started. Okay, let's get started. First things first, you're gonna want to look at your sourdough starter. You can see how bubbly it is. It's risen. This is the line, the rubber band line, and it has risen at least almost doubled in height, and that's what you want to look for. So make sure you give it 2 good feedings before you're ready to use it for your bread. And now we're going to get started. You need your scale, and you do need a mixing bowl. And then you're also going to need a spatula and a dough hook. I like to have these on hand also, and there's a link for this dough hook in the description of the video, and there's also going to be a link to the scale also. So let's get started. First things first, you're going to turn your scale on to grams. And what I love about this recipe also is that it's super easy to double or triple because it's in grams. You can simply just double it and do 2 loaves of bread. Just make sure you have enough starter left over. So you might want to take out a little bit more starter when you're feeding it. So in our mixing bowl, we're going to add in 375 grams of warm water, and we're just going to pour that in and make sure it's not super hot. And the key thing is hydration. All right, that was a little bit more than 375, so I'm just going to scoop some out. And yes, it's all scientific based, so you do want to make sure that you do have the right measurements. So if you have a little bit too much, then it might turn out too gummy or too flat. So do concentrate and get the numbers correct. All right, so there we go. 375-ish. There we go. Perfect. Now to this, we're going to add in, we're going to tear our scale, bring it back to 0, and we're going to add in 50 grams of our sourdough starter. So this is how you're going to make sure you don't want it too hot. So this is another step to make sure it is active and bubbly. When you pour it in, don't be afraid to pour it in. You're going to measure 50 grams, so it's not that much. And then you still have some left over. It floats. If it's floating to the top like this, that means it's active and ready. If it sinks down to the bottom, it's not ready, and you're not going to end up with a good loaf of bread. Don't throw it away, though. If you do see that it's sinking to the bottom, don't be discouraged. Don't throw it away. You can always add a little bit of yeast to it and continue on with the recipe, and it will come out fine. So if it does sink, add some yeast to it and continue making your bread. Don't waste it. But if it's floating like this, then you're ready to go. So make sure you cover your starter back up so it doesn't dry out. And then make sure you feed it again later on in the day. Okay, so to this, once it's floating, you're good to go. Grab your dough hook and you're just going to give it a little bit of a stir. Just to kind of break down the gluten in the sourdough starter and get it all mixed up. Simple as that. Now we're going to tear our scale again, and we're going to start to add in our flours, starting with the bread flour. So bread flour has a high protein to it, and it's very finely ground up than all-purpose flour, so it's going to give your bread a chewy texture, which is what everybody wants in bread. So we're going to add 340 grams of bread flour right into it, 340 grams. And again, you do want to be precise with this. You don't want to put in too much, because too much or too little, you're just not going to end up with the correct loaf or texture, and then you're going to get frustrated. So I spent many a days perfecting this recipe and making it user friendly, so it's super easy for everyone to follow. Okay, so now to the bread flour, we're going to add in some all-purpose flour, and this is 160 grams of all-purpose flour. So the combination of the two flours is going to really give you a delicious crumb and a nice crust. So 160 grams goes in. Again, you do want to be precise with it. Perfect. And then to that, nothing. We're going to use the salt afterwards. To this, we're going to, I'm just going to take it off the scale. Grab our dough hook again, and we're just going to gently stir it together until it kind of creates a shaggy dough. And just give it a nice good mix. You don't have to be super gentle with it. You kind of feel like you should be, because you work so hard to get it active and bubbly, and you don't want to like mess it up. But you don't have to be super gentle with it. You know, you could just mix it up. You just don't want any dry patches. And you're going to think, oh my goodness, this is not going to ever turn into bread. But you got to give it time. Sourdough is all about time. And you are going to be folding it every hour for about 4 to 5 folds. So every hour for 4 to 5 hours. So take it with you in your car. If you have to leave, take it with you, leave it in your car, let it rest, and fold it again. Don't be afraid to do it. We've all done it. It's what you have to do to get good bread. So once it gets like this, it starts to get sticky. It's a shaggy little mess, and you're like, oh my goodness, that's perfect. Don't panic. Clean off your dough hook, and then we're just gonna let it rest. The first rest is important so that the gluten develops in all the flours and the flour gets hydrated. So you don't want to over mix it at this point. You want to just let it rest and then come back to it. Okay, so once you clear off your dough hook, you're just going to cover it loosely with, I use a shower cap from the dollar store. You can get a 6-pack for $1.25. I use that. It fits perfectly over my mixing bowl and it seals it up. And then I'm just going to let this hang out on the counter. It doesn't have to be necessarily in a warm place, but you don't want it like ice cold. I'm just going to let this hang out for about a half hour to an hour, and then we'll start our series of folds. So come back at about a half hour to an hour, and we'll start folding it. Okay. It's been about a half hour. You can see our dough has not changed much, and that's fine. It's not going to rise up or anything like that because there's no yeast involved. So now we're going to start the folding technique. Now, typically people think, oh my goodness, the dough is so sticky, I need to add more flour. That is not the case. If you add more flour, you're gonna get a really dry dough. You don't need to add any more flour. Instead, you're gonna use some water. And it's just regular water, nothing fancy. Just dampen your hands a little bit and you're gonna start folding it. So I just like to scrape underneath, get right into the center, and then you're gonna gently pull up, fold over, turn your bowl 90 degrees, dampen your hands again, and then the same thing. You want to try and get as much dough off of the sides of the bowl because you don't want to waste the dough. And then you're going to pull in towards the center, pull up, gently stretch it, fold it over, turn it 90 degrees, dampen your hands again, and do that. So you're going to do this folding technique 4 times, turning your bowl 90 degrees each time. And this is 1 round of the folding technique. So we pretty much split the dough up into fourths and did each fourth. So each the top, the sides, the bottom, each fourth. And then that's it. Cover it back up and we're going to let it sit again for another hour. So the whole technique of folding it is going to build up the elasticity. So you want it to be able to hold its shape. Right now it's going to spread back out, become a blob of dough. You're going to fold it again, and as you fold it, it's going to hold its shape, and you'll be finding it that it's going to be forming a nice smoother dough. So let it rest for another hour, and then come back and we'll fold it again. Okay, so it's been another hour. You can see the dough has spread out again. So we're going to do the folding technique again. So you're going to dampen your hands. You're going to reach under your dough. I like to scrape it off the bottom because I don't want to waste it, and then stretch it over, turn. So now that you're at the other end of your dough, same thing. Reach under, lift, and pull. And you'll notice that the dough is got a little more stability to it. Yes, it still spreads out, but it's getting more elasticity. It's not as shaggy as it was when we first put it all together. So do that 4 times, and sometimes now that it's got pretty much a little bit more structure, keep your hands damp. You might be able to lift it gently off the bottom, and then you can start to roll it underneath a little bit. Make sure your hands are damp though, not soaking wet, but damp. So you're just gonna lift, let it kind of hang over the edge, and then turn it just a little bit. This is gonna start the coil fold and start to shape it into a bowl. And you'll notice that the dough isn't as sticky as it was, so you might not need to dampen your hands that much. So I just do it a couple times. Just pull it up in the center, let it drape over the sides, and then just tuck in the sides. Just let them fall in and kind of create a shape like that. And then we're gonna cover it again, let it rest for another hour, and come back and do it again. It has been another hour, so now we're going to take our lid off. You could see there might be some bubbles in there. That is perfectly fine. We are going to stretch it and fold it again. Now, because it has a little more stability to it, even though it's spread, it's got a little bit more structure, you might be able to do coil folds. So before we were doing just regular stretch and folds, now we're gonna try and do coil folds. You're gonna take both your hands dampened, and you're gonna reach under each side and connect your fingers in the center, and you're gonna gently pull it up. You don't wanna stretch it all the way until it rips. It's not ready. You'll know when it's ready. And then you just turn it a little bit, stretch and pull. Don't rip it. If it's not coming off all the sides, don't panic. You just turn it a little bit at a time, and then eventually it will all come up. But you don't want to pull it up so much where it rips. So as you can see, dampen your hands as needed. It's starting to come up all the way. So once it comes up, just let it hang over and then just fold it under like that. And that's the coil folds. If you like the other folds better, you can continue doing that. This is our third round of folds, and we're gonna do it about one more time, and then we were going to just shape it and pop it in the refrigerator overnight. So you can see how it's getting a little tighter, and that's just what you want, just like that. Cover it up and then do it one more time. The coil folds, do it one more time, and then we'll come back and shape it. Okay, welcome back to the last step this is shaping the dough. So you folded it one more time. You did either the coil folds or the fold, and now it's come time to pre-shape the dough. So this is what it looks like. It still might look like a blob, not resemble anything, but we're gonna shape it into a bowl. So what you're gonna need for this is you're gonna need a proofing bowl. Now I know most people don't have proofing bowls, so I like to use just a plastic colander that I got from the dollar store, and it works perfectly well. You're also gonna need a towel that's big enough that you can place in there. And then the only special ingredient that you're gonna need is this sweet white rice flour. You can use this, or if you can't find it and you don't have it, you can use all-purpose flour too. That's gonna work fine. So you're either going to take your rice flour or your all-purpose, whatever you wanna use, and you're gonna sprinkle it right into the bottom of your towel that is placed in your proofing bowl or colander. So typically a proofing bowl is called a banneton, and it looks like this. But if you don't have one, a colander from the dollar store will work perfectly fine. So once you got that all sprinkled onto your towel, you're gonna sprinkle a little bit onto your counter also. Just a little bit, just to be on the safe side. Now you're gonna take your dough and you're going to gently, make sure your hands are wet. Let me wet my hands. You're going to gently take it out of the bowl. And you're just going to plop it right onto your counter. So it might be a little bit sticky, and again, you want to use some water so that it's not super sticky. You just need a little bit, and we're going to pre-shape the dough. So you're not going to do too much with it. You're just going to carefully spread it out, and then you're going to stretch it into a rectangle, and you want the short sides of the rectangle parallel to you, so on the top and the bottom, and the long sides on the side, just like so. And it doesn't have to be, you know, any specific size. You just want it stretched a little bit. So now we're going to start folding it. We're going to do a book fold. So we're going to take the top and we're going to bring it into the center, and then we're going to take the bottom and we're going to fold it over the top. Now you're going to pick it up and you're going to turn it this way. So now the fold is right in the center. You got the short end on the top and the short end on the bottom. Now we're gonna do a stitch fold. So starting at the top, using both hands, slightly damp if need to. You're gonna pull it and stretch it into the center, pinching into the center. So it's just like you're stitching, which is called the stitch fold. And it doesn't have to be super pretty, don't panic. Stretch and stitch. Stretch and stitch. And you do want to kind of move a little bit quicker here. You don't want to take your time too much because it will start to open. So seam it up, stretch it, seam it closed, and then you're gonna start from the bottom. You're gonna roll it up tightly into a boule, just like so. And if it gets sticky, dampen your hands if need be, and that's okay. You can always add a little bit of the rice flour on the bottom too. So now you're gonna stretch it. This is my favorite kind of part, is you're gonna stretch and pull. So you're cupping your hands around the dough and you're stretching and pulling it. So you're gonna feel it get nice and tight on the bottom, and that's what you want. So you're stretching it and pulling. So you want a little traction on your counter. So don't put too much of the flour or the rice flour or too much water. Once you start getting a little sticky, that's when it's time to stop. But this is gonna create the seam on the bottom. So now you're gonna get your proofing bowl or your banneton or your colander, and you're gonna carefully pick it up and put it right in your banneton proofing bowl, just like so. Grab your shower cap, cover it up, and then you're going to place this in the refrigerator overnight, up to 24 hours, and just let it sit, ferment, marinate, and get delicious. So put this in the refrigerator 24 hours, at least 24 hours, no more. No, you could do less, and then we will come back, shape the dough, and bake it.